understand. I look forward to the next time. Unsafe. Unsafe. Every factor and culture stays got every live out there feeling unsafe. So another little blurb from my favorite bitch, Ann Coulter, came out. It says, actually, our culture is better. So feel free to subscribe to her podcast. It's like a podcast. It's a newsletter on Substack, Unsafe. If you don't know the history here, Ann Coulter is a political commentator. She's extremely conservative. She's very waspy. She is a lawyer by trade. Like, she graduated from law school. She's written many New York Times bestseller books. Okay, so I'm just going to read what she wrote. Actually, our culture is better. I see the pro-abortion crowd is still bragging about their 10-year-old rape victim, lamenting that the poor kid had to travel all the way from Ohio to Indiana to get the abortion. They make it sound like a trek from Iran to Iraq in the 13th century. That's funny. I don't expect coastal liberals to know this, but Ohio is next to Indiana. That's funny. The drive from the child's home in Columbus, Ohio, to the abortionist in Indianapolis takes 2.5 hours. The cost of the gas was probably a greater trauma for the family than the trip. That's shady. That's that's fucking shady. Sorry, wait a minute, let that sink in. Burn and burn. But as long as they're going to keep talking about how hard it is to get an abortion in Ohio, I'm going to keep talking about how hard it is to assimilate the third world into first world norms about women and children. Oh God, I'm going to read that again. As long as they're going to keep talking about how hard it is to get an abortion in Ohio, I'm going to keep talking about how hard it is to assimilate the third world to first world norms about women and children. This is so true. Child rape, gang rape, incest. It's been a long time since we've seen much of that in the United States. Of course, there are lots of things we thought had been abolished 100 years ago that our immigration policies are bringing back. Indeed, the precise reasons people doubted the 10-year-old rape victim until we found out the rapist was an illegal immigrant from Guatemala. Were 1. We grew up in America where such crimes are freakishly rare. That's true. 2. We are being systematically lied to about the new cultures being brought in by mass third world immigration. That's true. In its treatment of women, America is rare, even among Western nations. Toward the end of democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville attributes the unusual prosperity and growing strength of America to the superiority of their women. This admirable creature, he said, was the product of Protestantism combined with self-government and the spirit of freedom. Amongst almost all Protestant nations, young women are far more the mistresses of their own actions than they are in Catholic countries. She has scarcely ceased to be a child when she already thinks for herself, speaks with freedom, and acts on her own impulse. Cut to the mother of the 10-year-old rape victim in Ohio adamantly defending her child's rapist. That is very strange. Women rallying around the men folk who are rapists is something that's new to Americans. That's true. But such behavior is disturbingly well known to police and prosecutors who deal with large immigrant populations. Hispanic rape victims are unlikely to report victimization to the police because in their families, the male is the head of the household and women are subordinate to men. Criminal justice professor Shanna L. Mayer writes in her book, Rape, Victims and Investigations, Experiences and Perceptions of Law Enforcement Officers Responding to Reported Rapes. She continues, because maintaining the honor of the family is important, Hispanics and Latinos are more likely than other racial ethnic groups to blame the victim. The victim, not the perpetrator, is blamed for bringing dishonor to the family. With the media actively covering up the crimes of immigrants, it may take a while to notice, ladies, but American men were the best you ever had it. Let's check in with Tocqueville again. Although a European frequently affects to be the slave of woman, he wrote, it may be seen that he never sincerely thinks her his equal. In the United States, men seldom compliment women, but they daily show how much they esteem them. And he was comparing America to Europe. Forget primitive tribesmen. After your government undertook a massive program to relocate the Hmong people from Laos to Minnesota and elsewhere in the U.S., local law enforcement and medical authorities began to notice a striking upsurge in gang rape and forced prostitution. It's huge in the Bay Area, especially in Oakland, where there is a large Laotian and Vietnamese population, but let me just keep that to myself. At one St. Paul clinic, a pediatric nurse calculated that Hmong girls are about 6 times more likely than other victims to have been raped by 5 or more people. That is a lot of people. But their families blame the child rape victims. In Hmong culture, the Associated Press matter-of-factly explained, a girl who loses her virginity before marriage may be looked down upon by her own relatives, even if she is forcibly raped. Thus, one Hmong mother's response to her 12-year-old daughter being gang raped by at least 10 men, also Hmong, of course, was not to call the police. On the contrary, when the girl limped home after an especially brutal episode, her mother said to her, "You're just a little slut." So I just want to point out here the superiority of the Asian culture. Mothers looking down on raped daughters. These are like cultural norms, as in it's not like one person, it is groupthink. These are the people who are like immigrating over with their, wonderfulness. Whatever. This is their culture. Our culture sparkles and gleams, even compared to advanced European democracies, as noted by de Tocqueville. Among the interesting facts about America he cited was this. In America, a young unmarried woman may, alone and without fear, undertake a long journey. Not anymore, ladies. Sorry, but the rich need cheap labor and the Democrats need voters. I'm just gonna like say that again. In America, a young unmarried woman may alone and without fear undertake a long journey. Meaning that in America, even without being married, you can actually live a nice life. And that is the promise for American women, despite whatever counterculture you may come from. But with so many countercultures, like the numbers in the country are changing and American values are changing. And I mean, this culture of like hyper masculinity and the counterculture of like purity politics and slut, it's purity politics and slut shaming. But I mean, I don't even, there's another thing around like incest and gang rape, where the men who are doing the gang raping are accepted by their groups. And it's a really difficult thing to understand, you know, like looking at a group of men who look at rape like this is okay. But that's who they are. That's what their culture says. There's no one who's come to them and been like, no. Like, that's how they feel. That is what is acceptable. That is who they are. That's their culture.